Good evening. Hope all of you are doing well. Tonight we are learning Maseches Succah, Daf Kaf Vav, and we're starting 2 lines from the bottom on Kaf Hey Amud Beis. Let's jump right in. We're going to be continuing our sugya about Chassan and what he is pater from as it relates to Sukkah and Shoshvinin and Bnei Chuppah. And the Brisa writes as follows: Tanu Rabbanan, 2 lines from the bottom, Kaf Hey Amud Beis. Chassan v'hashoshvinim l'chol bnei chuppah, the chassan himself and all of the wedding party, they are p'turin minat tefillah uminat tefillin v'chayavim b'kriyas shema. 2 p'turin, they're exempt from davening and from tefillin, and they are chayav in kriyas shema. Why the distinctions? Take a look at Rashi, 2 lines from the bottom. Rashi says, 2 lines from the bottom, Dibra Maschel, p'turin minat tefillah de boya kavana, because as we know, davening requires kavana, and it's very hard to have kavana under certain circumstances. Uminat tefillin. Hold on. Uminat tefillin, that's before he's married. Talking about kriyas shema. That's different. So uminat tefillin, he's also pater from wearing tefillin mishum de shechicha shichrus v'kalas rosh. It's not uncommon to get drunk. We all know that when people drink too much, they can't behave properly. So therefore, they also should have no chiyuv in such a mitzvah. V'chayavim b'kriyas shema. Why do we say that one is chayav in kriyas shema? Because as Rashi highlights, and this should be a throwback to Shitas Rebbe in Maseches Brachos, the mitzvahs kavanasa eina ela pasuk rishon. The only pasuk that requires kavana in the mitzvah of kriyas shema is the first pasuk. And I remember the Gemaras there, I think they were saying there that they would say to their mishamesh that if I'm falling asleep, make sure I stay awake at least for the first pasuk, and after that, if I doze off, I doze off. That's the din dorais of kriyas shema. V'yecholin liyashev daitan shaktanak delikro pasuk rishon, and you can get yourself together enough, even if you're part of the bnei chuppah, even if you're part of the family, you can still focus enough. Now, all of that seems to imply, of course, that a chassan is chayav in kriyas shema, which is against the trend. That's not what we're used to seeing. That brings us to Chavav Amud Aleph, which indicates the more common shita. Mishum Rabbi Shila Amru, chassan pater. Chassan is exempt. That the chassan is going to be pater from what? Rashi, Dibra Maschel Mishum Rabbi Shila Amru chassan pater mikriyas shema. The Tarid, he himself has a tirda. Remember we discussed it's not just tirda stam. It's not just being distracted, but it's tirda the mitzvah. We made the distinction between Vesula and an almana, that the tirda of that particular mitzvah with that particular person, that is a tirda the mitzvah. He should be pater. But the others are chayav in kriyas shema. What is the scope of osek b'mitzvah pater mina mitzvah? This is a wild Gemara, and it's quoted in Shulchan Aruch, which we'll see momentarily. The Gemara's second line, Chavav Amud Aleph, reads Tanya. It's a brisa. Amar Rabbi Chanina ben Akavia, kosvei svarim, people who are sofrim, tefillin umezuzos, stam. That's where stam comes from. So kosvei stam. That's the acronym. Hein, them, v'tigrehen, the ones who sell those items, v'tigrehen, the ones who buy them and resell them. V'chol oskim b'maleches shamayim, and anyone who's involved in maleches shamayim, la'asuye mochrei tcheles, even people who sell tcheles, Patur mikriyas shema, uminat tefillah, uminat tefillin, umikol mitzvos amuras b'Torah. The Kayim Divrei Rabbi Yossi Haglili Shei Rabbi Yossi Haglili Omer Ha'osek b'mitzvah pater mina mitzvah, an extremely expansive idea of how we apply osek b'mitzvah pater mina mitzvah. So let's say I'm giving shiur, and let's say that shiur takes place from before Zman Kriyas Shema kicks in until after Zman Kriyas Shema ends. L'chora, I should be pater. So that's where the Shulchan Aruch comes in. I'm going to read the language. Just keep your eyes on this brisa. That's why I didn't even make photocopies, because you don't need it. Here's what the Shulchan Aruch says in Orach Chaim, Siman Lamed Ches, Seif Ches. Kosvei, Tefillin, Umezuzos. Heim, V'sagrehem, Sagrehem, V'chol Oskim, Amlech Shamayim, Pturin, Me'anachas Tefillin, Kol Hayom. And then here are the words that are added in by the Rishonim that are not in the Gemara. They're exempt from those things. Zulas b'shas kriyas shema tefillah. No, you're not pater all day. You got to go to Shachris in the morning and put on tefillin like a mensch. Of course you have to do that. After that, because people used to wear their tefillin all day long, after that, you should take off your tefillin, because those take b'mitzvah pater min mitzvah. But if efshar l'kayim shnehem, if you're able to do both, of course you're not pater. Obviously you're not pater. That was the sentiment that we got last night at the bottom of the Gemara in Kaf Hey Amud Beis before where we started. It said in the name of Reb Zera Ana, achle b'sukkah, he would eat in the sukkah and v'chadi b'chuppah, and he would have a simcha by the chuppah as well, because he got to do both mitzvahs. So of course, that's what the Shulchan Aruch is writing here in the name of the Rabbeinu Yonah, Rabbeinu Yerucham, and other Rishonim as well, that when the Gemara here on the top of Chav Vav Amud Aleph indicates that everyone is pater from Kriyas Shema, Tefillah, Tefillin, everything for all the mitzvos, that's where Efshar l'kayim shneim. Under those, okay, fine. Under those circumstances, there can be a case where you can't put on tefillin. There is such a circumstance. happens, but it's not an everyday affair. It's very rare that these things should actually take place. Not that it's not the din. It is the din, but we have to know how to apply it. It doesn't mean that just because I'm doing mitzvah X, I can therefore skip mitzvah Y. We have to make sure we understand these halachos clearly if we are to exact them. 8 lines down, Chav Vav Amud Aleph. The Brisa writes, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis teach us, Holche Drachim Bayom. You have a person who travels by day. So then, Pturim Mina Sukkah Bayom. Then, of course, he's going to be pater from sitting in a sukkah during the day. However, V'chayav in Balayla, your ptur is not a 24-hour ptur. If you're traveling during sunlight hours, okay, so you don't eat in the sukkah during the day, but at night when you get home, you sit down and you have a suda. It's not a 24-hour tour. The reverse is also true. Let's say you're driving, you want to keep the kids asleep. You start driving at 8 p.m. through the night, and it's sukkah, fine. So you can eat in the car, no problem. You don't have to change anything. Everything's going to be fine. However, it's not a 24-hour tour unless you're traveling for 24 hours. What about holche drachim bayom uva laila, long trip? Let's say you're taking a flight around the world. It's a very long trip, 24 hours. It says the Gemara, Termina Sukkah, vein bayom uvein balayla, that you are then going to be exempt under both cases. And as well, holchen ledvar mitzvah, if a person is traveling to do a mitzvah, Pturin bein bayom uvein balayla, even if you only traveled for part of the day, that's different because the mitzvah is another level of power to pater you. Okay, ki hada Rav Chizda v'Rabba bar Rav Huna, because these Amoraim ki havu ayla b'shabsa the rigla on Shabbos of the regel on Shabbos of Sukkot, they went lebei reish gelusa and havu ganu arakta desura. They were sleeping. The ganu is to lie down. The ganu is the Aramaic word for lying down. Arakta desura. What's arakta? Take a look at Rashi. Rashi's above where we are by about 2-3 inches. Dibra maschel arakta. Rashi says al svas nahar, on the banks of the river. So havu ganu arakta desura. They were in surah and they were sleeping on the banks of the river. Amre. They said no need for a sukkah. Anan shluchei mitzvah anan upturin. We have the mitzvah that we're doing right now. They were going to be makabel pnei rabo, which, as Rashi highlighted yesterday, is one of the classical examples of osek b'mitzvah pater mina mitzvah, that you're pater from sukkah when you're makabel pnei rabo. And that is an inyan that one should go see their Rebbe on Sukkot, which is why in a lot of shuls, I know our shul has done it, other shuls in the community have done it as well. It's time for people to go see the Rav of their shul. It's considered a mitzvah to do so, to be makabel pnei rabo by the Chag. But third of the way down, Tanu Rabbanan, continuing on the same theme, Shomrei Ha'ir Bayom, if you have a person who's a security guard on Sukkot and they're protecting the city during daylight hours, granted, Turamina Sukkah Bayom Uvechayav and Balayla, but they're still obligated at night to fulfill the mitzvah of eating in a sukkah and sleeping in a sukkah and living their life that way in a sukkah. Shomrei Ha'ir Balayla, you had the night shift, Turin Min HaSukkah Balayla, Vechayav and Bayom. Of course, it only applies for that section of the day that you're pater, but the next section of the day, Vichayav. Shomrei Ha'ir, people who are protecting the city, but they got a double shift, Bein Bayom Uvein Balayla, then P'tur Min HaSukkah, Bein Bayom Uvein Balayla. Of course, that makes sense. All right, it's not like you have to flip your whole world upside down and change your work schedule. No, there are pturim that are built into the halachos of sukkah, but it's not stam. It has to, again, you have to be clear on what the halachos are. Shomrei ganos upardesim, a person whose job it is to protect fields. Their job is to watch fields, so either animals or thieves don't steal produce, whatever the case may be. P'turin bein bayom uvein balayla, they have a wider kula. So asks the Gemara, in this brisa where we learned about the Shomrei Ha'ir, and we learned about the Shomrei ganos upardesim, v'lei avdei sukkah hasam v'lei svu. I don't understand. Just build a sukkah where you are. You're sitting there the whole time anyways. You got a 24-hour shift and you're in a field. Build a sukkah. You're under clear sky blue. Go build a sukkah. Why are you exempt when you can build a sukkah and fulfill both things? So this, the Gemara says, is a machlokes. Abai Amar, we're exactly halfway down. Abai Amar, he says, no. The reason why they don't have to build a sukkah is because teishvu ke'ein taduru. Because we know, a reference to the pasuk, that a person should have their life in the sukkah as they live. How does this play out? Take a look at Rashi. Rashi is about a quarter of the way down. Dibur hamaschil ke'ein taduru. Rashi says, ke'ein taduru kederech shehu dar kol hashana. Bebeso, like you would live at any time of the year in your house. He's kikaso atorah lahaniach diraso. Then you have to leave your home. V'ladur kan b'sukkah im mitosav, with your bed, b'kli tashmisho, and with the things that you normally have, your couches, whatever is normal, matzosav, all of your kalim of your house. The zeino yachal lahavian shamim ne'atar. What, you're going to schlep a whole U-Haul to where you're working? That's not normal. And therefore, says Abaye back in the Gemara, Teshu Kain Taduru, to build your sukkah here where you're a secure, that's not normal. You don't have to go that far. That's not the din. The din has to be that it's Teshu Kain Tadur. So that's what Abaye says, why in this case, where you're a security guard while you don't have to build your own sukkah. Ma'ashein Kain, Rava argues. Rava Amar, if you're there to protect something, Pirza Kora Leganav, you're asking the Ganavim to steal from you. So Rashi here explains that if you have a tent, it's going to be surrounded on most sides. You're basically asking the Ganav to go hide on the backside of the tent and steal from you. So your whole job is to be a security guard. It undermines the whole reason why you're there in the first place. So Rava says it's not Teshu Kain Taduru. Maybe Taka, you could have built a sukkah had it been the case. And in fact, says the Gemara, Mai Beinayu, what's the difference between Abaye and Rava? We asked the question, why in our Brisa, where it says that you're a security guard for 24 hours, why can't you just build a sukkah? Abaye says you're in violation of Teshu Kain Tadura. This is not a normal place to live. And Rava said, no, that's not the problem. The problem is that it's impractical because if you build a tent, they're going to steal from behind the tent. So what's the difference between the two? Mai Beinayu, says the Gemara, Ika Beinayu to kamintar karya de pere. Let's say that you have a three-sided tent and you're only watching one pile of fruit and it's directly in front of you. Nothing for the Ganavim to steal from behind you. So under those circumstances, Rava would say, no one's going to steal from behind me. I'm only watching one thing and it's in front of me. So Rava would say, Taka, you're chayiv in building a sukkah in that case. Masha'en Ken Abai would say, inherently that sukkah can't be built because Teshu Kain Taduru, as Rashi explained, it's a tircha, and this is not the normal way to do things. That brings us to the two dots a little bit more than halfway down. Chavav Amar Aleph, let us continue. Says the Gemara, we spoke about in our Mishnah, that if a person, Rahman al-Islan, is not feeling well, then they and the people who are tending to them are then patur from the mitzvah of sukkah. Tanu Rabban, and the rabbis teach us in a brisa, it's a tosefta actually, chola she'amru, when the Mishnah that we are learning now, the Mishnah in Maseches Sukkah refers to a person as a chola, critical information, lo chola sheyesh bo sakana. No, we're not talking about someone who is on their deathbed. We're not talking about someone that has any illness of massive significance. We're talking about even a person has an illness and they're not so, it's not life-threatening. Even if your eyes hurt, you have a bad headache. I ate at David Zuckerman's house 3 years ago. I fell apart on his couch with a migraine. You might remember. Oh, that's chash, but he wasn't with me on the couch. That was chash barosho. That's not chola sheyesh bo sakana. And had it been sukkahs, I could have easily walked out of the sukkah. No, I could have easily walked out of the sukkah, totally patur. That's fine. And it could have been me and anyone who needed to tend to me. That would have been totally patur. That is what the Gemara is saying, that the patur of chola and sukkahs, that patur is not chola sheyesh bo sakana. It is even chola she'ein bo sakana. By the way, just as an important aside, that as it relates to Hilchos Shabbos, the halacha is that we have a gzera derabbanan not to take medication on Shabbos because of gzera shema yitchon. The Gemara explains this idea. The way they used to make medications back in the day, they would take herbs, they would take spices, they would grind them up, and then they would consume them in whatever way they would consume them. So today we still have that iser derabbanan, that one is not allowed to take medication on Shabbos unless they are a chola she'ein bo sakana. Same exact line. How do we define that? So it's not defined as leniently in the Shulchan Aruch as it is here. In the Shulchan Aruch, it's defined as if you're nafa lemishkav, you're ill enough that you need to lie down, or you're chola kol gufo, that you're sick enough that your whole body, the flu, that sensation of your whole body being sick, one of those two things is enough. Let's say you're just congested and you want to take some medication. That you're not allowed, that's insufficient. You're still going to shul, it's insufficient. Until it knocks you down, you're not allowed to take medication on Shabbos. Important caveat, if the medication you're taking is preventative, then you are allowed to take it. If you know that you're about to be sick enough to lie down, then by taking medication X, you're preventing that, that's mutter as well. But the same phrase is here, just a very practical halachic aspect for Shabbos. So that's what the Tosefta starts with in regards to chola. And in fact, with a story, Amar Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, Pamachas chashti be'enai be'kesari. He says once he had some type of eye ache or a headache of some kind, be'kesari, that's where he was, the city. V'hitir Rabbi Yossi Beribi said, he said, you don't have to sleep in the sukkah. V'hitir, he was lenient on me, lishan ani umisham shai chutz l'sukkah. A practical application of the halacha. A ma'aser shahaya. Beautiful. Rav Shara l'Rav Acha Bardala l'migna b'kilsa b'sukkah mishum baki. This is interesting halacha, one that applies in Chicago, especially under certain climates, that Rav was lenient. He allowed Rav Acha Bardala lemigna to lie down, bikilsa, inside a bed, and Rashi highlights a bed that's an ohel mamish and a real hefsek within the sukkah. It means you're not in the sukkah anymore. But sukkah mishum baki, Rashi quotes a French word, seemingly a French word, and the Mefarshim explain this word as yutoshim, which are mosquitoes or bugs. And we have a lot of bees in our climate, especially on an early sukkah here where it's still very warm out. We have a lot of bees. So this seems to be a tour that you're allowed to do something, whatever it is, put up some type of netting in your sukkah if it's very buggy. It seems that it would be mutter from here. That's story one. Story two, Rava Sharale, the Rabbi Achabar Adel Migna, he allowed someone to sleep, Lemigna, to lie down bar, mimatlalta, to sleep outside the sukkah, mishum, sircha de gargishta, because there was a particular sand that was being used on the ground, and under the circumstances, it had a terrible odor, and that was enough of a reason to leave the sukkah. Why? Why are these two cases, the case of Bucky, the case of the bugs, and the case of the gargishta, of the sand that doesn't smell very good? Why were they lenient? So says the Gemara, an idea we've seen briefly, we're 3/4 of the way down. Rava's following his own shita. Rava mitzta'er pater min hasukkah. We know this idea that a mitzvah is pater min hasukkah, that if there is a person who is under difficult circumstances, it's again not personal, but it's circumstantial to the environment. It's pouring rain. That's how we know. Like if it's pouring rain, you're pater from eating in the sukkah. On the first night of Sukkot, we're more makbid. We try to wait even up until chatzos. We try very, very hard to fulfill the mitzvah on the first night of Sukkot. On the rest of the days of Sukkot, you just go right inside and you eat. And when it comes to Sukkot again, Rabbi Robinson will remind us of all of these halachos. But Rava, the time these cases were because mitzvah pater min sukkah. Asks the Gemara, but our Mishnah doesn't talk about mitzvah. What does our Mishnah say? Chole in mitzvah. Who says it? Where did you get that from? The mitzvah is pater min sukkah. Says the Gemara. We're not saying that mitzvah and chola are identical. They are different. Amrei, here's an answer. Chola, when we talk about someone who's sick, their level of ptur is greater. How so? Hu umesham ptur, both he who is ill and those who are tending to him, his caretakers, are allowed to go outside of the sukkah. But mitzvah, if someone's uncomfortable, so then hu pater misham shavlo. But if let's say I'm a machashiv guy and I have avadim, and I'm mitzdair, I can't handle the cold, I can't handle the bugs, I can't handle the rain. I can go inside, but my mishamshim who are yidden, they're still obligated to stay in the sukkah. So while it's true that we're making an inference that chol is different than mitzdair, the difference is not in the level, not in that the person is pater. Everyone agrees the person is pater both as a chola and as a mitzdair. The only difference is those who are tending to that person. That by a chola, the people who are Jewish and tending to the chola can go inside. Masha'en kain, when it comes to mitzvah, that's not true. Now we had said in our Mishnah, the third din of our Mishnah, we said ochlen achila sarai chutz l'sukkah, that a person is allowed to eat some kind of small amount of food outside the sukkah. Asks the Gemara the practical question. We're at the 2 dots, 15 lines or so from the bottom of Chavav Amud Aleph. The kama achila sarai. How much food are we talking about? How much food are we talking about? Says the Gemara. Amar of Yosef, tarte otlas be'e, 2 or 3 eggs worth of food. Okay, that's not an insignificant amount of food. That's 6 kizesim. That's about 6 slices of white bread, the way that we would have measured it nowadays. If you look in the kazayis book with all the pictures, we assume that a kazayis of bread is about 1 square slice of white bread. So let's assume it's a
third of a slice. The book on shiurim says a third of a slice.
Is a kazayis?
Base is 2/3 slice. I'll look it up tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not familiar with that. How can you? That means you can wash and bench on a third of 1 slice of bread.
No, that base, you need to base it of wash and bench. Right?
That's this Gemara, but that's not halacha l'maisa. The Gemara does discuss that, but we pass in halacha l'maisa that when a person has to wash netilas yadayim, that with a bracha on netilas yadayim, it has to be more than a kazayis. If you're eating less than a kazayis, you still wash, but you don't make a bracha al netilas yadayim. Right, so there are distinctions in halacha, and certainly you won't bench because it's not ve'achalta the savat. You haven't eaten enough. But whether or not you make a bracha al netilas yadayim, that is greatly dependent on the very small shiur. If you're eating less than a kazayis, let's say you want 1 bite of pizza, and you know that's all you're eating. You still have to wash. You just don't make a bracha on the washing. You of course make a bracha on the hamotzi. That's birchas hanehenin, obviously, and then of course you take a bite. But then that's all you can eat because at that point, if you want to then wash anymore, but of course the bracha.
Just taste it.
It's not a taste. You're taking a bite.
I thought you just said you have to have a cheeseburger.
No, we're not talking about benching. We're not talking about benching. There's 3 things here. There is bracha on netilas yadayim. There's the bracha on the birchas hanehenin on eating the food in the first place, and then there's benching. By al netilas yadayim, you do not make the bracha of al netilas yadayim unless it's a kazayis. By the food itself, you make a bracha even on the slightest morsel of food. If you're swallowing that food, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. But there's no benching because the amount of food you ate was only 1 bite, and that's below the threshold of any bracha achrona. You take 1 bite of ice cream, you make a shahakol, but no borei nefashos. Who only takes 1 bite of ice cream? I'm just saying that it's an example that's why in this case you would not make al netilas yadayim. You would make hamotzi lechem min haaretz, and you would not bench. Okay. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Yosef was of the opinion that when the Mishnah says that ochlen achila sarai, that one is allowed to eat Achila sarai outside the sukkah, it's 2 or 3 beitzas. So says the Gemara, no way. Amar le Abaye, there are some people, I am one of them. That might be a full meal for someone. For that guy, it depends who you are. For that guy, 6 beitzas worth of food is a lot of food. Not a lot of people are satisfied with that. You're calling it sudas arai, but for a lot of people, it's a sudas keva. So if the Mishnah is calling it a sudas arai, then it has to be mamash sudas arai for everybody, or at least for most people. But what you're talking about is unreasonable. That's a fair chunk of food. So therefore, says the Gemara, a good question, and Abaye therefore posits his own answer. Elamar Abaye, you're right. Is kidatayim barbe rav v'ayil lekala. Kala from the word yarche kala. When a person goes to the shiur of the Rebbe, so the barbe rav is a reference to the Talmid. I mean, it's kidatayim. They're going to grab some food. You take a look at Rashi here. Rashi's a little bit more than halfway down. Kidatayim barbe rav v'ayil lekala. Baboker in the morning they finish shachris. Kishalchem lebeis hamedrash. They go to grab food, and sometimes the Rebbe gives a long halachic chabura. The doeg shema yimshechu hashmuos. They're afraid that it's going to be a long morning shiur. V'toim milopi v'shos, and he grabs a little bit of food to make sure that he can sustain himself throughout the shiur, but it's a small amount. The way that I heard it in the shiur that I was listening to earlier today is you grab a Danish on a coffee. You're not having a whole suda with like eggs and bread. It's a small amount of food. So that's Abaye's answer. So 2 shitas. Shita number 1 was the basic answer of Rav Yosef, and then Abaye, which is very strange because Abaye was a Talmud of Rav Yosef. So that's difficult. How did that dialogue work? If Abaye is a Talmud of Rav Yosef, you don't just get to push back on your Rebbe. I don't know the answer to this question. I'm raising it on my own, but knowing the generations that Abaye was a Talmud of Rav Yosef, it's very difficult to understand how that dialogue played out. The Gemara continues 10 lines or so from the bottom. Tana Rabbanan, Brisa. Yes, as we saw in our Mishnah and here in the Brisa as well, that one is allowed to eat achila sarai outside the sukkah. You want to grab a piece of fruit outside the sukkah, no problem. You want to have a little bit of you want to have a drink, no problem. That's great. All of that's fine. However, you're not allowed to sleep outside the sukkah, even shena sarai, even a quick nap, not allowed. My time. Why the distinction? Why do we allow achila sarai outside the sukkah, but we don't allow shena sarai outside of the sukkah? Amar Ravashi, gzera shema yerdem. We're afraid that your short little nap will turn into a very long nap. That's happened to the best of us. So therefore, we're concerned that since that would not be appropriate to take a full nap outside of a sukkah, a full sleep. So therefore, we don't even allow the gzera d'Rabbanan. If that's true, that you're so concerned about shena sarai outside of a sukkah, well, then we have a problem in another area of halacha. Ella says the Gemara, Amar le Abaye, Ella hadatanya. We have a brisa that writes, Yashen Adam shena sarai b'tefillin, that one is allowed to take a short nap with their tefillin on. Avalo shenas keva. So says the Gemara, I don't understand. You said that outside of a sukkah, you're not allowed to take shena sarai. You can't take a short nap because we're afraid it'll turn into a long nap. But by tefillin, we said you could take a shena sarai. Why? Asks the Gemara, 6 lines from the bottom. Lechu shema hirdam. Why don't we have the same exact concern by hilchos tefillin that we had by sukkah? If the small nap could lead to a long nap, then you got a problem. So it says the Gemara, Balabatish Svara, Amar Rav Yosef, Bered Rabbi Loi. No, but most you gave your sleep to somebody else. What does that mean? It means you got someone to wake you up. You got a wake up call, 7 a.m. So it says the Gemara, you want to take a little cat nap, then you're going to ask someone to wake you up. So it says the Gemara, that's the answer. That's why by tefillin, we say that it's really allowed because we're under the assumption, we're making a new kimto. We're under the assumption that you got someone to wake you up. Says the Gemara, what kind of answer is that? Maski flo Rav Mesharshia, arvech arva tzarich. Your guarantor, the guy who's supposed to wake you up, he needs someone to wake him up. Everybody falls asleep in a quiet room. So you're sleeping, you say to your friend, wake me in 10 minutes. 4 hours later, everybody wakes up after a gun's nap because he fell asleep too. So the Gemara says, if you're relying on someone to wake you up, he needs someone to wake him up, which means that we can't use that as the answer to the Gemara. So therefore, the Gemara on the first very long line of Chavav Medal, 4 lines from the bottom says, you're right. We're not talking about in the case of tefillin that someone could take a short nap by tefillin. We're not saying that that's allowed because he has someone to wake him up. Ella said, the Gemara doesn't say Ella. It does earlier. So what does Rav Yochanan say? B'maniach rosho bein birkav askinan. He's folded over on himself taking a nap. He puts a little pillow on his knees. He puts his head down. It's very uncomfortable. If you're very tired, you'll knock out for a few minutes, and then you'll wake up in a few minutes. But you don't need a guarantor to wake you up. You don't need a wake up call. You're going to wake up because the blood's going to stop circulating to your feet at some point, and you're going to wake up because it's uncomfortable. So that's what the Gemara is talking about in the case of tefillin. That's why by tefillin, the sheina sarai is mutter. The short nap is okay because you're folded over and uncomfortable. Masha'en came when it comes to the sukkah. There we don't have such a svara. Although had you slept that way, seemingly that would be mutter too, but that wasn't the case by sukkah. We just assumed that you were taking a regular nap on a couch. Rava has a different svara. Rava Amar ein keva l'shena. This requires Rashi to understand that there is no keva for shena. Take a look at Rashi. Rashi is found Rava Amar. It's about 20 lines or so from the bottom of Rashi's, 3/4 of the way down. Rava Amar, l'shema yeradim lo chayshina. We're not concerned about shari yeradim. Hilkach b'tfilin shari. The sukkah, hilkach b'tfilin shari. The by tefillin, we're not concerned about that at all. The sukkah, hainu taima. The reason why by sukkah we have a concern is not because we're afraid you're going to nap long. The asr shena sarai lefi she'ein keva l'shena ve'ein b'chiluk bein keva le'arai le'inyan sukkah. There is no difference, says Rava, between a short nap and a long nap. She'ein adam kovei atzmo l'shena. Shepamim she'einu elam namne me'at v'dayo bekach. So I took a cat nap today. I don't know, people do that sometimes, and that's what gets you through the rest of the day. You don't always need a 4-hour nap. Your 20-minute nap could be an equivalent of a long nap. So therefore, there is no shenas sarai or shenas keva. All sleeping outside of a sukkah is shenas keva. And it's not the concern that Shema, maybe you'll sleep longer. Any nap is problematic. And the reason it's problematic is because, as the Gemara says in the name of Rava, Amar ein keva l'shena. There is no minimal amount of time of sleep. If you fall asleep, it could be enough if you sleep for 20 minutes. So now the Gemara is going to present a 3-way machlokes in braisos, and we're going to answer with three different ukimtas. Tani chada. In one brisa, we have the following information: Yashin adam b'tfilin shenas sarai. That one is allowed to take a short nap in their tefillin avalo shenas keva, but they cannot take a long nap. The Tanya idach, another brisa says bein keva bein arai, you can sleep no matter what. The Tanya idach, another brisa says lo keva v'lo arai, all the iterations that one is not allowed to take a nap, even a short nap. So we have 3 different brises. How do we answer them up? 2 lines from the bottom. Lo kashya ha denaki hu biyade. In the last brisa where it says lo keva v'lo arai, that you cannot take any kind of nap, that's when you're holding the tefillin in your hands. And if you're holding the tefillin in your hands and you fall asleep, they may fall on the floor. That's unacceptable. But another brisa where we say that you're allowed to have shenas sarai but not shenas keva, that's the first brisa we saw. That's where you're wearing your tefillin on your head. And the middle case of bein keva bein arai, that it's mutter, is hadepari sudra ilave, where you've taken off your tefillin and they're covered up. Then of course you can take a nap, you're not wearing them. So 3 ukimtas to explain the 3 brisas. V'kama shenas sarai. How long is this short nap considered? For the shitas that allow for one to take a nap with tefillin on for shenas sarai, says the Gemara, Tani Rami Bar Yecheskel kedehiluch mea ama. The amount of time it takes to walk mea ama, 150 feet. That's not so far. How long does that take? What is that? The average house property in Chicago is about 30 feet. So that's about walking 5 houses. 30 seconds? 40 seconds? I don't know, it's not that long. It's a very short nap. That's shenas sarai, incredibly small amount of time. Tanya nami hachi brisa that supports this. The first din of this we're not going to focus on now. The first part of this brisa is not our raya, but what does the brisa say? Last line, chavav amud aleph, as we turn to the top. Hayoshin betfilin v'roa keri. If a person is sleeping and they're wearing tefillin, and seemingly this brisa holds that it's mutter in the Tanakama v'roa keri, and he has a mikra laila while he was sleeping with his tefillin, then he wakes up and recognizes what happened. Then oches beritzua. Then what he should do is he should not touch the bottom. He should be oches beritzua. He should remove the tefillin only by touching the straps and not by touching the bottom. Ve'eno oches b'ktzitza divrei Rebbe Yaakov. What's ktzitza? Rashi dibra mascha v'lo yochaz b'ktzitza him tefillin atzman. There's a difference in the level of kedusha of the tefillin boxes themselves, which hold the parshios, and the ritzuos, which service the bottom. So therefore, if a person was wearing tefillin and there was a mikra laila, they had a seminal emission, so then the halacha is they remove their tefillin not by touching the bottom, but rather by touching the straps themselves. V'chachamim omrim, no, yashin adam tefillin only shenas sarai. Not a deep level of sleep that could lead to a mikra laila, just a very short cat nap. And as we just described, it's that very short amount of time. About lo shenas keva, but not a long nap. V'kama shenas sarai. How much is that? Kedei hiluch mea ama, just to walk for whatever it is, 100, almost 30 feet, 30 seconds, whatever it is. Omar Rav says, unrelated to this in a way, which is Aser la'adam lishon biyom yoser mishenas hasus. One is not allowed to sleep during the day more than the sleep of a horse. What are we concerned about here? Says Rashi. Rashi on the end of the second line, Dibur Hamaskil Lishan Bayom Ibnei Bittul Torah. One should make sure that they are not violating the Isser of Bittul Torah. This is not simple. The standard, as one of my rabbeim put it when I was in yeshiva, he used to say, the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Nebuch, you have to sleep 6, 7, 8 hours a night, whatever your body needs, no more, no less. Okay, so 8 hours. The Rambam says you should sleep 8 hours. You got to know yourself.
Winter and 7 in the summer.
What?
He says 8 in the winter and 7 in the summer.
Oh, really? I don't remember that. That was in, was that Hilchos Deos? I have to look that up now. I don't remember that distinction. Okay, so 7 or 8, whatever it is, whatever the number is. Okay, you're supposed to learn 24 hours a day. You got to sleep 8 hours. All right, you got 16 hours left. You got to go to the bathroom. You got to eat meals. You got to spend time with your family. Deduction. But at the end of the day, every free minute is meant for learning. So Stam, you would just want to go lie down just to shoot the breeze? No, you're not. That's Bittul Torah. You got to make sure that you're on the nose with that. So says the Gemara, you're not allowed to sleep during the day, al Bittul Torah, more than Shena Sasus. V'kama Shena Sasus, how much is that? Shisin Nishmei, about 60 breaths worth of sleep. Post can discuss what this is. Is it 30 minutes? Okay, that's a shiloh as well. Although 30 minutes, that's 2 breaths a minute. That's not, I think the Gemara was giving, according to those sheets, it was just basically a catchphrase. Go take a 60 breath nap, whatever the colloquialism of the day would have been. He says, one of my Rabbeim, Rashi says who that was, Rabbi Bar Nachmani on the third line of Rashi. Rabbi Bar Nachmani used to nap Kidirav, just like Rav would nap. Udirav would nap Kidirebi. Uda Rebbe, Kid David, and Rebbe would take a nap like David. Uda David, Kid Susya, and David would take a nap like horses take naps. How do they take naps? Uda Susya, Shisin Nishmei. Okay, so that's how long their naps would be during the day to avoid the Isser of Bittul Torah. They would take a quick nap, whatever that was. Let's call it up to a half hour. That's approximately what Shisin Nishmei is. The Gemara says 10 lines down, 8 lines down. Abaye have a noim kidim ayil mipum pedisa lebekubi. He would take a nap. He was naim. He would nod off. He would go to sleep for the amount of time it would take to go up from pum pedisa to bekubi. And Kari Ale, remember that Abaye, as we learned on the earlier page, Abaye was a Talmud of Rabbi Yosef. Kari Ale, Rabbi Yosef, his Rebbe called him out. Batlan. It's amazing to hear these conversations because Abaye was like the great Abaye. So it says the Gemara, Ad Masai Otzel Tishkav, how long is the lazy guy going to sleep? Masai Tako Mishin Ascha. When are you going to get up out of bed and start learning like a Ben Torah? I'm not being the mean one. I'm just quoting the Gemara. It's like, come on, get up. You got to learn. You got to learn. Okay, 1/3 of the way down, we're going to go to the top of the next page to the next Mishnah. Got a little bit of time. Says the Gemara as follows: if a person does go to sleep during the day and they have tefillin on, you can take off your tefillin or you could not. That's during the day though. But at night you have to take them off. You're not allowed to put them on. The concern here is what we refer to in the poskim as guf naki. That when a person is wearing tefillin, they have to make sure that as a bodily function they don't pass gas while they're wearing tefillin. That's considered a lack of covered for tefillin, and therefore one does not wear tefillin at night. If not for that concern, then one would wear tefillin at night. So therefore, the Yerushalmis who wear tefillin all day, that's not so pasha. They have to make sure that they know their bodies very, very well. And as well, the Meforshim also discussed this. They want us to make sure that they control their hiruri nashim when they're wearing their tefillin, which is not a simple thing ever. It's certainly not simple when you're being told not to. The first thing you think of is something you shouldn't think of. So one should be very, very careful with that in regards to their tefillin. The Mishnah Brura in Hilchos Tefillin is very sharp about it, that one should focus when they're wearing tefillin. If this does happen, a person has hiruri isha, then they should push themselves b'yiras shamayim to try and stay focused with their tefillin on. Okay, but that's what Rav Nassan knows. Rabbi Yossi Omer hayiladim. Rashi says hayiladim is not children; it's bachrim, it's older people. La'olam choltzin ve'manichim regilin betuma. And Rashi here says, what does that mean that these bachrim, these boys who are already bar mitzvah, they're going to be regilin betuma. So Rashi says just to our left, 1 inch up to bramaschal shiragilin betuma. Rashi says kasal gedaitach. At this point, what do we think? Shemayuru that they're younger, they have less control of their thoughts, and it's much more likely to lead to a mikra laila, to lead to carry. So that's what we think the Gemara is talking about. So says the Gemara, Lema, maybe we should say that this Rav Yossi was of the opinion that about carries asr laniach tefillin, that a person who's tamei tumas carry can't put on tefillin. Amar Abaye, no, you can't learn that from our case of Rav Yossi with the Yeladim. Amar Abaye, be Yeladim vinishosei mimahen askinim. We're talking about young avrechim, young couples who are relatively newly married. Shema yavolu dehergel avera. That it's normal for these couples to be what? Correct. Sorry, hergel avera. Wow, thank you. Nice catch. Shema Yavo, right? Did it say Avera before? Or did I just make that up? Yeah, I think I just made it up. Yep, I did. Shema Yavoli de Hergel Davar. Hergel Davar, that they may end up with some level of intimacy, which would, of course, be problematic with tefillin. Tan Rabbanon. In fact, in this very same vein, Shachach b'shimish mitasu b'tefillin. I don't know how that's possible, but if a person is wearing tefillin and they were shachach and they had tashmish amita, so there the halacha is pretty sharp in regards to the removal of tefillin. Eino ochez lo b'ritzuah v'lo b'ktzitza. You cannot touch the ritzuos, even though you're wearing them. You can't touch them with your hands. Lo b'ritzuah. Not the ritzuos, and not with the boxes themselves, not with the batim, until one removes the tumah by washing the tilas yadayim. Typically, when we say yadayim askaniosein, it means that you've touched a part of the body that is otherwise covered. This is true around the clock. If a person reaches inside their shirt to scratch their stomach, and they actually, you have to wash the tilas yadayim before you make a bracha. You have to make sure yadayim askanios, and that's why there's a machlokes in the Rishonim about natilas yadayim in the mornings, the Rosh and the Rashba. What's the reason why we wash our hands in the morning? Is it because it's bria chadrasha, or do we say because yadayim askanios? So if you, no matter what you say, if you're sleeping and your shirt's untucked and you scratch your stomach, yadayim askanios. So here too, of course, that's the case. So therefore, one would have to wash their hands before removing their tefillin if they were shachach b'shimish mitasu b'tefillin. One more Mishnah says the Mishnah, 2/3 of the way down, Chavav Medbeis Maisa behaviu lo l'Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. They brought him some food. Lito mesatav shel to taste something. And l'Rabban Gamliel shnei kosavos. They brought him a shiur of 2 kosavos uduli shel mayim, and they brought him some water. V'amru, what did they say to him? Ha'elam l'sukkah. We should bring all the food to the sukkah. We're going to see in a moment. This is a stira. Literally, our last Mishnah said you can be ochel achila sarai outside the sukkah. So the Gemara is going to ask that question. When they brought food to Reb Tzadok, ochel pachos mikibetza. He ate less than a kibetza. Not to mapa. He just for cleanliness purposes. He picked it up with a napkin of some kind. And he ate it outside the sukkah, and he didn't make a bracha achrona. So it says the Gemara, Maisa Listor. This whole Mishnah goes against what we learned in the previous Mishnah. You just taught me one Mishnah ago that ochlan achila sarai in regards to sukkahs, and then you give me a whole Mishnah about achila sarai, and all of a sudden it's usher now. Like all of these Rabbanim are saying, go eat it in the sukkah. I don't understand. Says the Gemara, you're absolutely right. You're right. The Mishnayos here are not fully written out, and they should have been. And here's what the proper text is. Says the Gemara, 4 lines from the bottom, Chavav Medbeis. If a person wants to be strict on themselves when it comes to not eating outside of a sukkah at all, even though it's mutter, you want to have a chumrah, no problem, machmir. We've only seen this maybe once or twice in Shas so far. Yuhara is the Gemara's terminology for basically showing off a little bit. Yeah, look how frum I am. I don't even drink water outside of a sukkah. Says the Gemara, if you're like being erlich about it, no problem. You want to be machmir, no problem. But you should just know the din. The din is like the previous Mishnah, that ochlan achila sarai chutz l'sukkah. Umayse nami, there's another story very similar. The heviu lo l'Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai lito mesatav shel, according our Gemara. L'Rabban Gamliel. So we're blending the 2 Mishnayos together. And Rabban Gamliel as well. Shnei kosavos with the shalmaim, with all the water, top of chav zayin and al v'amru ha'elam l'sukkah. Fine. Again, a quote from our Mishnah, blending the Mishnayos together as a part of a proper understanding of our Mishnayos, that yes, one is allowed to eat outside of a sukkah. However, if you choose to be machmer, there's no yuhara, then you're not feigning gaiva. It's totally fine, no problem at all. Says the Gemara, just a quick diuk, ha-kibetza by sukkah. It seems to be that if it is a kibetza, then you do require a sukkah, but that's a problem. Because we saw 2 shitas already today about what it means to eat outside of a sukkah. We saw 2 or 3 kibetzim. That was a shita of Rabbi Yosef. And we saw Abaye kadesh shiyitom barbe rav lekala. That small amount. So this is neither of those shitas. So it says the Gemara, lemet tavitu to the Rabbi Yosef Abaye. This is a double contradiction. You say that the shiur, the threshold at which one is obligated to eat something in a sukkah is a kibetza, that violates Rabbi Yosef, who at the open of our Gemara today said 2 or 3 kibetzas. That's certainly not a shita. And it violates Abaye, who argued with Rabbi Yosef, his Rebbe, and said that it's just a cup of coffee and a Danish. It's a much smaller amount. Says the Gemara, no, lav dafka, dilma, really pachos mi kibetza netilo bracha labai. Maybe when it comes to a shiur of food that's less than a kibetza, you don't have to wash and you don't have to make a bracha achrona, but when it comes to the kibetza by netilu bracha, if you eat that shiur, you do need netilu bracha, but really it's not a distinction in regards to whether or not you have to eat that in a sukkah. We'll stop right here, Daf Chav Zayin, and we'll pick up right here this new Mishnah tomorrow night. Wishing you all a beautiful night.